where we should be doing something else.
Right. So the something else, what is that something else? Is it volunteering, which obviously, a lot of the country's doing, and in a certain way, that's you want to feel people feeling helpless, right? Because it was very dramatic. Someone was like sleeping in their bed in their pajamas and they were attacked. So you want to feel like you could do something. It's also, there's unwritten rules. No one is discussing, for example, the gas masks. It's almost like this round, we're not using gas. And like, I don't know if people agreed to that, but like, apparently, like, even Hamas was like, no, that's ridiculous. Like, we wouldn't use gas. Like, it's just, and you think about that, like, that's something that everyone had to have, the gas masks. Everyone has them in their thing. It was like a big deal. But and in all safe rooms, you have like the filters on the wall and that thing that no one really knows how to even use. But it's almost like that's not the discussion in 2023. It's not like a thing.
Well, I mean, it might be sort of like you're saying, maybe trying not to make people panic and stuff. But I think, I mean, as painful as this collapse of our preconceived notions is, I still think that this, as far as I could see for years going back now, is a strategic change, right? When there was the Gulf War, and people needed to cover up their windows for fear of that gas. I mean, Saddam had chemical weapons. They were used in the Iraq-Iran war. I do think like there are certain things that if they were present in large quantities and ready to use in our region, that would have some indication, despite how we've kind of been disappointed by our own intelligence and our ability to have those early indications. I don't know. I mean, it's still maybe a remnant of that trust that you have for the establishment that says, like, all right, like, we
But like,
have good
no
reason.
news anchor, no one's like, no one even asks, like, what about that thing? It's just in a certain, I mean, but you could see this. It's amazing because we get to see it sort of happening live. Like when my wife and I were in bed when the missile hit the hospital. And I told my wife, I'm like, so this is like, these are one of those peaks. She's like, what do you mean? I'm like, this is going to be, it's going to start right now. And you're like, within like 10 minutes, there's like, Joe Biden says X, Y, and then like, that starts. And you then see in the news, there was, it's like the Holocaust. It's the Holocaust comparison that's like locked in. And then like all the news, even if I agree with what they're sharing, and I believe it's the facts, very much like COVID, you just start hearing like the same thing being repeated like again and again on every channel. Like that's the sound bites we're selling. So it's like, but I even believe that the reporter is genuinely crying, but I don't think she realizes that like she was destined to cry already at this point, because like that's how like this thing is already getting built in a certain sense, like how it's being sold and how it's being packaged already. Like the fact that like the New York Times within like a week has the captives like on like the parents of the captive like on the cover head, and like it's a really good photographer. Like she's like she's like in a pose. I get it that she's doing that to bring her daughter back, but like all of that is already like so orchestrated. In a certain sense.
I think that's, I mean, you're bringing up a point that I think is critical both to how this war and the war in Ukraine and our politics are happening, which I think goes to D.C. Schindler's concept of misology. If you're familiar with it, if not, I can. So basically, what he says, misology is the hate of reason. He's asking the question like, what does it look like when someone truly is opposed to reason, truly hates reason? and he says you can make the analogy to love. So, there's the person who would pronounce their love and truly feel that, that's someone who is connected with that term. There's someone who would never pronounce their love. They have, I don't know, some bad relationship with that term. They don't believe in it, but that still shows a certain amount of respect to it. Like, you would not bring that out. Like, you wouldn't say that you love someone because that shows a certain respect. And then the worst one is the one, the true cynic could pronounce their love at the drop of a hat, right? But they're not committed to it. There's nothing behind it. And the same goes for reason, that, if you truly follow reason, you can truly follow what's, where it takes you, even that if that's not where you want it to go, let's say. And you can go like, no, I don't trust in reason. I oppose everything that is reasonable. But the true cynic, the true hater of reason, goes with it only one step. And then when it stops fitting them, they just let it go, and they don't even mind. And the reason I'm connecting that to what we're talking about is that it seems like, I think at the core of a lot of what's going on in these wars and in politics, and the worldwide reaction, and even conversations I had with complete anti-Semites, right? The notion is just a complete buy-in to confirmation bias, to everything. Like, the truth of something only depends on whether it fits my narrative or not.
And for that day.
And for that day, right? Like, and it doesn't even hold further. And D.C. Schindler connects that exactly to Book One in The Republic by Plato, where he says, like, Thrasymachus is that kind of person. He says, like, he's not committed to reason, and then you fall into this world where you are hurting yourself because you cannot acknowledge the fact that you don't know what's good for you. You don't have that knowledge, and then you cannot see the world anymore. And to me, that's just a really strong trend that I see everywhere.
Don't you see that though? Don't you see some of this as being a result of post modernity and its ideology? I'm saying, playing around with even what terms mean with all these great narratives. So, like, dismantling them, even if within post modernity there are nitzotzot, as they say. There are divine sparks that can be extracted. There's a great book by Rav Shagar about this, called Luchot V'Shivrei Luchot, and basically just saying that, like, that kind of dismantle of boundaries and definitions allows us to play around with, let's say, more Kabbalistic terms in with more ease. So that's sort of the direction he was going. But generally speaking, you are letting in a tremendous amount of chaos in that kind of mindset, which brings you to absurdities like that math is racist. I don't know if you ever seen that yet, but there's a whole move how the way math is being taught, right? Or these assumptions that we make, these are racist assumptions, and these are colonial things, and these are the way we interpret what truth is. So once you're in that land, or and this doesn't have to do with where someone should stand politically with regards to LGBTQ plus, add whatever you want with regards to policy, but the utterances or their scientific rigor with regards to the documentation and studies that come out with are bananas. This is just like crazy talk. So as a world, we're accepting this. So is it so crazy if we live in a world where a man is up is down and down is up? And I use this term the way the youth talks today is, dude, I was literally dying, right? And if you go to the dictionary today, if you open it up, the term literally
means figuratively, right?
and that's the example of like the end of society. Like there's just like it's bananas. So you're there. So is it so crazy for someone to, like you just said, to hold two contradicting thoughts at the same time? Yeah, it is. I did not a deep dive, but a small little swim in with regards to Hamas, and specifically the educational process that's going on, systems that they have going on over there. We have to recognize that they take over in around 2006. Most of the population of the youth over there has all been indoctrinized by Hamas. That's all. That's the only world they know. It's horrible what they're being taught there. And unfortunately, this relates also to the Palestinian Authority. A lot of this horrible curriculum. And I don't know, I was thinking to myself, and maybe this relates a little to the religion question or things we were touching on last time we spoke, but Germany post-war, America comes in and says, like, listen, we're taking over the schools, the education system, and these are what you're going to be teaching the kids. And in theory, we're like, okay, listen, it worked because both countries were trying to had like a Western agenda, and America, being the older brother and like very skilled at this, has already done this. So it makes sense that they're going to teach us this right now. Even if the Muslim world wants to come and say, like, listen, that's great. We don't want any of this anti-Semitism being taught in our schools. We're totally for like all that. There's no fit for the Western culture being taught over there. So put aside the bigotry and the hate. The question is also like, they might want math and sciences, but are you going to be able to bring in like a secular mindset into a very, very religious population? I just don't know, like, what I think has to happen just can't happen over there. And how would you force them? Like, you have to like wipe away this ideology, but ultimately I believe that's the crux. Like, it doesn't matter whether they're religious or not. Like Fatah and Hamas are at different levels of religiosity, but both of them ultimately still are anchored to Hadith, Quran, Surah, which is just the way it's interpreted is bad code. And yeah.
Like you were saying a few things there. One, with post-modernity, I think that there's a lot of talk about post-modernity that kind of takes the bad parts and says that that's what post-modernity is. And I think post-modernity is like the as far as I know, right? Post-modernity is foremost like a movement in the arts, and not necessarily just the philosophical aspects that came with that. And I don't know, Foucault, Derrida.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't attribute like all of those ills that we're talking about just at the feet of postmodernity, especially since like the example that I found most prominent is sophists, right, from ancient Greece. So I don't think this problem is new, and I think this incarnation is our time, our time's version that we will need to deal with. But I think the problem is ancient. The problem of that sort of mythology, that sort of commitment to to the hate of reason, to a sort of detachment from reality and from what is beyond and what is ultimate, however you want to phrase that goes back a very long time.
I think it goes in the Bible we have the daughters, the sons of God and the daughters of men. They procreate. There's different interpretations of that, basically, but but there's a period where there's sons and daughters being born, and when it comes to this hybrid, they're basically only having daughters. And I don't think they're only having daughters, but the sense where it's just like multiply and be fruitful. At that period, there was just they were just multiplying, not being fruitful. And I think there's a sense of where like there's direction is lost in a certain sense, and there's just nothingness going on. And you could, like you just said, that there's a repeat of that again during Nero's time, or during Caligula. So I'm saying so. I would agree with you, and I don't lay it all at postmodernism. And like I said, I think there's even tools that we could use from postmodernism, but I think it allowed for a lot of fertile ground for a lot of these things to bubble up to, and again, they're not. You won't be able to triangulate them all back to that source, but I think that that kind of mindset, definitely in colleges, it could be extremely confusing.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like there's an element that's just about the personal, like the personal connections. I think, as far as I know, in America and in Europe, these things are significantly more felt in the day-to-day sense than in Israel. In Israel, we have kind of different battles going on, right? I don't think I don't know. At least I don't feel that that's really at the forefront.
Are you talking about like
Postmodernism and let's say a lot of the sort
culture
of
wars?
yeah, a lot of the sort of culture wars are very different in Israel than they are in the States, for sure. But yeah,
I agree, and I would say that I've given examples about this in the past, where like there's a member of Knesset named Mirav Michaeli, and so she is very into the pronouns, and right, so you could have a lot of feminists in Israel, and you could have a lot of people that would consider themselves progressive. They would have zero patience for that kind of pronoun kind of conversation in Israel. And it's not because they're not sensitive. They're just like, what are you talking about? Like, they're just like that. That's not the game that's being played over here in a certain sense. And I was also saying that like even racism is different in Israel in a certain sense, because like Ashkenazi and Sephardi Jews could be racist to each other, but at the same time, there's still like sort of this love that's going on between them. Like they still see themselves like as the same people. Like I think in the States, like the black and white don't necessarily, like, while they're all American, they don't necessarily see themselves as brothers, or that terminology is not being used. And you could have that like in Israel still being used around. And I guess like, did you, when you were in the army, if you were in the army, did you have any Ethiopian soldiers with you?
so no, I was in a technological role. I think we had, in the base in different roles, but I didn't have anyone serving like close by with me.
So you could imagine, I think you'll agree, but like you're on a combat base and you have an Ethiopian friend there, okay? And you have a Yemenite friend over there. Their tent mates are going to be using very racist slurs, but everyone's laughing in a certain sense. And like they are not, and like you would never have that fly. Like, this is crazy. Like in Israel, you'll still hear the N-word used in some contexts, but like it's a non-issue, and that would never fly in the States. And they're looking at it as being like, what's the big deal? So I would agree with you that like the culture wars definitely manifest themselves differently over here. And like there's many things that in Israel, like obviously they would not fly if they're in the States. They would not be PC. But like, I guess that's like the fact that we're still like in the Middle East. I think that part of that's also the tension that we have, even like with our cousins, the from the Arab world, and specifically the Palestinians, which is, I've heard someone say this in the news recently, which is we're eating sushi where people are eating hummus, basically, and we're speaking English and French and Hebrew, where everyone else around us is definitely knows Arabic, whether it's like whether you're Egyptian or not. And in a certain sense, like we really westernize ourselves up to a certain point. Again, like it bumps up against like the culture wars where you see like we're not that Western, but in a certain sense, maybe Israel erred in the last 75 years where like it sort of we turned our back to the region in a certain way, which is like this region is done and we're like really looking towards the West. But you could assume the relationship would be different between Jews and Arabs if Jews spoke Arabic fluently.
Absolutely. I think that's a reasonable point. I want to bring that back to your second point from before, which is so this is something I wanted to ask you from the previous conversation as well. You're talking about the indoctrination, and I've seen as well. I see how horrible it is, and it definitely brings one to despair. Right? You look at that, and it's really hard to imagine a world in which that is somehow resolved, and for all the reasons you described. And in the last conversation, you also asked me whether this attack made my own dream, let's say, politically die, or something like that. We discussed it a bit, but I didn't really see like what's your vision to moving forward. Like, yeah, those things are very intimidating. They're, I don't know, challenges that seem insurmountable, but like there's gonna be a tomorrow. What happens in your, I don't know, if you could have, I wouldn't say your way, but let's say the best way that the people that you trust the most would get to be in power and have good advisors, etc. How does that look?
So we obviously don't know what the outcome, or like we just said, we're still like we're in the first chapter. We don't know how this is going to sort of play out, and I think like based on sort of what happens, there could be very different reactions to like what needs to happen next, obviously. So assuming we're rolling with this scenario, which is like there's a war, but basically like Israel has had its suffering, and now like we're sort of pushing forward in Gaza. The day after the war, quote unquote. So, and obviously we're speaking like, this is like dreamland in a certain way. But first off, the rhetoric in the country has to change. I know this sounds very difficult. And right now, like even in the circles, like, close friends of mine, I'm not walking and talking about this because I don't know if anyone's in the mood to hear me use the term like cousins with regards to like the Arabs. But like I have this I'm using an anecdote over here. I was talking to a contractor that I'm working with. He's like, listen, it's very difficult to me. Like, I want to kill them all. And he hears me saying like, no, like, there are cousins. He's like, what, you're a lefty. Now I'm not, I don't consider myself like left wing, but like, he can't see past that. So first off, I think Israel should adopt a policy, which is the conversation is to peace and love while you could still act swiftly and diligently. As in, there's nothing like you could do all the things you're still doing right now. And at the same time, there should constantly be, and we can't wait to have peace. We love the Palestinian, but like there's never any of that conversation. So there has to be a lot more of that kind of conversation. And that goes hand in hand with like, they stopped it in Israel in the 70s, I think, but like the kids need to learn Arabic, like conversational, because like if you could play it, if you wanted to, like strategically being like, you know what the enemy is thinking, but like, even if it's, know what your neighbor is thinking ultimately, but like, this is the conversation that you're having over here. So I think that is a must. And I think there needs to be a religious conversation, which also discusses at the end of the day, these are people of the book. These are people that we don't consider idol worship. Like anyone that's religious, that there are people in this country and they sway elections, and so they should know and should be reminded what let's say, what Rav Netanel Payumi says, a contemporary of Maimonides, that the Muhammad is a prophet and the Quran is a divine book, and then he uses the Quran to explain all these things, and to validate Judaism, or the text by Rabbi Cook that talks about that it's like, it is totally feasible that other religions would have their own leaders and their own prophets that would arise. So realizing that there could be a conversation even that says, like, again, the death is horrible, and you could say, like, there's no way that's what Muhammad would have wanted, but framing the conversation with these people are legitimate as well, and not that our neighbors, they're just like this tribal people that eventually we could just like eradicate, and see them as part of our story. And again, I'm stressing this religious element, but a lot of these religious members of Knesset feel very comfortable holding the torch of religion and the Torah in their hand, but it's the Zohar who says that Islam represents din, justice, the left hand of God, and Christianity represents chesed, grace, and Judaism is like, it's part of the conversation. So I think that needs to be brought up to the front again, where we have that kind of conversation, which is not kumbaya, but it's seeing the other. The language barrier needs to happen, and the conversation that we see each other living together. That's number one. And I think that would also allow you to do, not an excuse, but bombing a hospital then is a lot less intense once it's backed with, we also just built this whole stadium for our Palestinian cousins right now. Israel should fund the building of mosques. Like, as in, like, oh, we're horrible what happened to the mosque over there. Every mosque that's destroyed in Gaza, we will gladly erect a new mosque in, territory X. We'll do that. But that's not the current. And we should, it's reverse psychological warfare. Like, many of the schools in Gaza and in the Palestinian authorities are named after terrorist bombers, jihadists. That's the name of the school. We should call our schools based on what we believe to be noteworthy Arab Palestinian leaders. And we should amplify that and push that. So I would say that would be, like, on a policy level, I would be trying to push that. There would have to be a conversation. Well, I might be going all over the place, specifically about the war moving forward, or like Israel in general.
So I'll focus it on a different direction, which is, so far, I know we're in different areas of the political spectrum, right? But far, I see nothing to disagree with in everything you said. Like, all of these things sound legitimate. I don't know, like, about the details, whether it's building mosques or like, that's not critical. But the spirit of your things, very much resonates with me. Where would you bet, like, that I would disagree with you? Where do you think our
I would bet you disagree with me. I would bet. I say this, like, with an extreme, which is, like, I'm okay having an Arab prime minister, right? So I'm open to that level of, let's say, togetherness. There must be loyalty to a Jewish state. It's a Jewish state, and, like, we're not changing the anthem. That's the anthem. And I'll give you a more specific thing. There's the Nakba, right? Okay. The Nakba, it can't be taught in a way where the country is seen as the enemy. So, like, it needs to be in a certain way. Like, we know what happened to the Native Americans, and that's obviously horrible what happened to them. But it's not feasible for kids to being taught as in this devastating thing happened to us, and, like, we're hoping that one day this will be turned over. So, like, I don't know how to formulate that, but that is part of, like, there could be an Arab prime minister who has to does his 5 prayers and believes in Muhammad, but he believed that Israel and its story is like the Jewish story. And you could be like, well, it's a more modern version of that. That's all great, but that is the story of the place. So it's not a even if you have a 2-state solution situation in the state of Israel, those Arabs are loyal to the story of Israel.
Okay. I mean, again, I don't think it's where we disagree. Maybe it's a matter of, like, I have practical questions, right? When you say, like, an Arab prime minister would have to, do this or that, and it's like, that's kind of hard to institutionalize, right? If you say, like the level of nuance that you would have to police seems unlikely in a state. But I don't think, again, that I have a problem with the spirit of your things, right? Of the way you think.
So I just see that I see that being, let's say, problematic for someone on the left, requiring a someone from a different religion sort of to buy into some other religion, which is clearly like, there isn't there. So this relates to another thing I would do. I would enact a separation of church and state in a certain extent, but only because I believe that will strengthen the religious component of the country. So
I absolutely agree on separating church and state, and the fact that this would be a very good thing for religion. And in general, I think when you look at the left, right, the cry against the religious coercion or hadata, I don't think that it's a cry against religion. I don't think that people that are secular like me, that don't want to participate in that lifestyle, I wouldn't say lifestyle, to be religious, right? That I don't want to disrespect religious life, but that's not something that we have against other people living that way, right? That's not something that we want to stop other people from doing. And the sense, this is something that I wrote you that I think there's a lot to talk about. We were talking about the reason why secular people in Israel are throwing away, let's say, the baby with the bathwater. They're not generally being interested in the Jewish, let's say, cultural treasures, right? And I mean, I gave you an example about the specific interactions that I recalled at the time, but when I think about it a bit more, I think it's a bit deeper, right? Because those interactions happened way later, when I was able to. I was already after the secular yeshiva, and I had my own view of Judaism, and I realized it then. But when I look back at being a kid, growing up secular, the way that religion appears to you, like if you have a religious friend or traditional or something, what would you know about how their life is? Stuff like they cut toilet paper before Shabbat, and they play all these weird games, right? And it's funny, right? And I know today that this is not the essence, and it's not the beauty of Judaism, but that's what the other kids can tell you. That's what the other kids can convey. And when you try to, figure out what it is, they just seem crazy to you, right? And I remember the head of my secular yeshiva. He was talking about the time when he grew up religious, and he chazal b'she'ela, so he became secular. And he says that, like, looking in hindsight, he felt like it was like a cultural reinforced psychosis, that he was literally lying in bed and thinking that his imaginary friend sort of is something that he's interacting with in the most, let's say, unhealthy way psychologically, right? That he
Is the imaginary friend, sorry, that's AKA God?
yeah, in this case,
Okay, yeah,
right?
yeah.
So a very sort of stripped down perspective, like without all of the different layers and perspectives of that. And I think, to me also, like I didn't even go to the secular shiva because I was so curious to learn about Judaism. I kind of found my way there, and having seen one lesson, just like being present, just to get an impression of the place, it was a very good impression that these are people who care about truth. These are people who want to do exegesis, with the text, which I didn't know the word for at the time, but like I was very impressed with the spirit of the exploration, which is something I was really looking for. So, in that sense, I feel that a lot of those things are connected uh, with that unhealthy binding of church and state. Like when there's less of that, then I think the religious life can or yeah, religion in general can be something that you can turn to, that you can go to, like people go to philosophy, like people go to. And definitely, I think the natural thing is when you're in trouble and you realize that you need to confront the big questions in life. If that seems, if you've seen enough of the beauty of your own culture, then that's usually the first place you'll go.
Right. So I think, unfortunately, there's plenty of blame to go around. I'll start with the secular. And I understand that it's like a chicken and the egg in a certain extent, but the reason I blame, the reason I have some blame at the secular is because, and I'll reference Rabbi Cook again. He has a famous article or what the word I'm looking for, essay with regards to, it's called the generation Hador, and he talks about there how, in a certain sense, basically you're talking about this super enlightened generation, which is like talking about social justice. And at the time it was like, there's a lot of socialism, but like, in its core, you have like all like, so like, wow, like we have our forefathers in the desert were not having this kind of conversation. And we're even told like, Abraham's relationship with God is with El Shaddai, and Moses already has like a much more unique relationship already with God. And then when Moses sees Rabbi Akiva in that famous story, and he doesn't understand what Rabbi Akiva is talking about, and he references that this comes from Moses, he's happy because he realizes the essence is still there. However, I think the generation, like in Israel, and again, some of it is because of how they experience religion from the authorities right now, but all they need to go is go 2 generations back, and it was already there at their front door. But it seems as if there was a sense of like wanting to remove it, and I see that. And again, I gave you this example where like seeing the gay flag on the pride flag on Yom Kippur was, to me, sort of a sign like where secular Israel is saying to the Jews, like, you go into the closet with all there needs to be a separation, and I'm wearing these fringes, and like, we don't want that.
Can I respond on that point specifically?
Sure.
Because I think that's an important point. To me, that was, again, and like I'm saying, to me, not necessarily to say that's what I think the whole picture is, but from my own bias, right? That event, by bringing in politics to what should have been the holiest day, right? To do this kind of as a political statement by the organizers, Rosh Yehudi, of this event.
Yeah.
That was the point that dragged this onto there, right? Like, and then sort of the response that at least I can say from my view that people had is like, how dare they, right? Like this, because this day is very important to the secular people as well, and a lot of them go to Bet Knesset. A lot of them don't, but the there's something about Yom Kippur that was always very, was always kept away from all of the discussions. Everyone respected it, and the sense that like you would be willing as these organizations to sully that for our political fights, to kind of stamp it like we'll do it our way. Disregard anyone's opinion, disregard the court's ruling, and we'll do it. Despite all of your objections. I think that was the secular sentiment towards that. Like, how dare you?
I disagree with the framing, because I see it as Orthodox Judaism presents itself this way for the last, 2,000 years. In the Jewish country, there shouldn't even be a discussion about it. It's the same thing about like when they go to people, Chabad organizations that put on tefillin, phylacteries, and you see it's a minority, but someone takes a video like, why are you talking to this kid about this? Any person in Israel could talk to any Jewish kid about phylacteries because it's something we've been doing for 3,000 years. It can't be taboo. Doesn't make sense that in the Jewish country, because the reason you're here in this land goes back to that story, because the person that was picked, that was told to go. Now, if it's all mumbo jumbo, then you are an occupier. Like it goes, I see it hand in hand. Like you can't separate those two things. And that's why saying, I'm putting aside the court thing. The idea was that anyone that saw, even if they did a division, they had a division between the men and the women. Put aside the fact that they allowed that for Palestinians, for Arabs to pray in separation. And there was no version and there's no way that they would ever make them separate, ever. They felt comfortable. The secular community felt comfortable demanding this from their own people, which is already bonkers. Both because it's not, well, no, put that aside. Secondly, let's say they did see it and they saw that the rabbis were doing this. There was like a political gain in it as well. Still, it's prayer time. I'll tell you what the difference is. A lot of these secular people, I know I'm generalizing right now, they know the nuances between the Shiites and the Sunnis. And when they go to an ashram, they know about all these things they read, but they won't pick up a book about their own stuff. They don't know the differences between like this Hasidut and that Hasidut, and that's in your backyard. And there's a sense where like, oh, but like he could be telling me about Derrida. So you read through that, you learned French to learn this, but you don't know what this line says, or this, like, and if saying you went to a secular yeshiva, which is also something that was less common when we were younger, now more common, but still like not like everyone's doing that. And it's almost like novel, like, I wanted to connect to my roots. But that's what, like, if you follow if you go to the East, you'll realize all the East is telling you is what you had in your backyard and you could connect to yourself. But we're always looking for it somewhere else. And we're looking at that what we're doing over here as old fashioned and crazy and nuts. And so I look at our own community and our own population, and I see a lot of them don't want to spend the time or put in any effort in going into their own treasure troves. Now, why I say there's enough blame to go around is because Judaism, or Orthodoxy at the very least, has been doing a very bad job selling itself in the last 75 years. And there's obviously Holocaust. A lot of people die. There needs to be a resurrection. There's the idea of that we're still like in exile. So that, you have all these different versions of Jews coming to the land and wanting to maintain, their old world country sort of mindset. All that is bad news bears. And the fact that there isn't enough leadership pushing things forward. But things like Rosh Yehudi, like this organization, to me, is a bridging of the gap. They do have a much more open understanding and liberal conversation But people then have news like, look at them. The guy's saying he wants to be able to make everyone religious. He's a religious person, and that's what he believes. He's not doing it for malicious reasons. Like, then all Christians are assholes, and all Muslims are assholes.
What the thing is, and I think we've gotten to where we disagree, right? The idea that I would want people to become the best that they can be, I'm all for that. The idea that I know what they should be and that my version of that is the version that should be accepted is where I disagree. And the point is, like,
I don't think we're disagreeing, though. I'm not saying, just to clarify.
That's my problem with Rosh Yehudi, right? When you talk about these videos that people are getting really annoyed at, and I'm not as emotional as most people, but yeah, I see the problem. The problem with that.
So what do you see as the problem?
Yeah,
because I don't see him. I don't hear him saying, "I know you're the ant." Like, you do 1, 2, 3, and you're saved, or your soul is saved, and that's not what I'm hearing from him.
So what I'm hearing from him is the way that people need to connect with Judaism is this way, right? Like the way that Orthodoxy. Like,
but
for instance, right? There are Reform synagogues, right, where there isn't a separation between men and women. Now, a lot of people feel more comfortable with that. You can say it's, for, against, whatever. And again, there's secular people, like I said, that could connect with it from a secular yeshiva, from, all sorts of perspectives. And the notion that we have who was it? Called it the empty wagon, I think, Chazon Ish.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that we have our empty wagon, right? That the secular world is coming without any culture and any value of its own is one that I deeply oppose.
I disagree with that as well.
Okay.
But I also think, so when I hear him speaking, and maybe I'm painting too much of a rosy picture of here, when I hear him speaking, or when I'm speaking even, okay, I don't have the answers. More than that, my system, even if I claimed I did have the answers, my system, there is no Sanhedrin. I can't impose my law. So it's already built in to something where, like, I can't even impose it to you based on my own rules. Okay. Now, traditionally, Orthodoxy was the only game in town. Traditionally. Right? Ironically, the courts that said, that you shouldn't have this division on Yom Kippur, the head of the courts are all in synagogues during that time, in a traditional synagogue where there is that kind of division. Okay? Now, because that's how has been practiced traditionally throughout the centuries.
Yeah, and there's no problem with doing that in the synagogue, right?
I understand. Well, I would say even outside, because no one's forcing anyone to pray. You don't want to pray, don't pray there. This is a public space, and we're just offering public prayer to everyone, and we're going to do it in the traditional manner. Now, people say, like, that's ridiculous. Why is it ridiculous? Why is it ridiculous?
Well, the place, like, if you do that in Bet Shemesh, that's not ridiculous. If you do it in
no problem. Did the area offer some other place?
What?
Did the municipality say, okay, don't do it here, do it there? Like, do it in another public space where, it wasn't the fact that it was in that location. It's the fact that it was done publicly. So not just publicly, but in Tel Aviv. And the reason is that politically, right, the idea of tzivyon, the idea that, okay, in this city, we want to have, a certain way of life. And we want, let's say, to have restaurants open in Shabbat. We want to have only women runs.
What?
Only women runs, like marathons for only women.
If you say so, I'm not.
And we want to allow space where, obviously, we want to allow a space where Muslims could pray traditionally. Also, we'd also like to make sure that in Jerusalem, there's a pride parade as well, because like that, it also belongs over there. Like it's so much to add. It's so
thing
crazy.
is, right, again, like the notion that I think you're getting from me, or that you're pinning on me, let's say, that I'm saying no way, nowhere in the public space, by any means, is not what I'm trying to say, right? I'm saying in this case, with all of the heated debate going on, with the everyone being as uh, highly strung as they were, to take the to rush into that conflict, that seems just like sticking your finger in the people's eyes.
So let's use a different example that happens at the same time. There's a rabbi, reform rabbi. What's his name? He's in the Knesset. He's in Avodah, I think. I'm forgetting his name right now. What?
Gilad Kariv?
Yeah, Gilad Kariv. Okay, so Gilad Kariv, because of what happens, he decides to post a picture. Okay, and maybe we'll disagree over here as well. He decides to post a picture. Well, you know what? Let's put this on the side. I want to go back for a second while I was saying there's enough blame to go around. I think when I was saying, when I hear this guy speak, and I don't hear, let's say the ultra Orthodox rabbi speak, they're saying it's my way or the highway. This is how religion is practiced, and that's how we're going to fight for law X and law Y, and this is what it needs to be. Okay, and they're like very much shoving it down someone's throat. In Orthodoxy, there is plenty of room to have a conversation. There's the 70 facets of the Torah, the 70 faces of the Torah. There's more than enough wiggle room to play around, while you still have to be tethered to some sort of baseline. Or an example, they say, like, the king of ancient Israel had to have a Torah scroll, a main one that he kept with him in the temple. And then he has another small one that he keeps on his body when he comes and he leaves. And there's an interpretation where it needs to be dynamic. As life changes, he needs to have something that's dynamic, but it's ultimately connected back to that core. So I am very open of having a conversation that's more not this is the way you're going to do it. But right now I'm giving a Pirkei Avot shir. Why am I giving Pirkei Avot? And I'm teaching it, talking to Ben based on what my understanding is of these texts and what they're requiring from us to do. Okay. And one of them is like, you should be studying, you should be learning. And then the practical point was, yes, it's a waste of time to just be binging Netflix. And I think it's also a transgression, as in like, as far as to myself and to like my creator and to this world, if I do that too much, right? So that's not my value at the end of the day. Now, I'm not telling people don't watch, yes, watch. Now, how do you live? I'm offering my interpretation to these texts and I believe that what Rosh Yehudi is saying is, I'm giving you an option to look at to these texts. Do I think you live a better life if you do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Yes. You don't have to say yes. You don't have to commit. You could drive here on the Sabbath. You could do whatever you want. These are what these texts teach. And I'm going to assume, knowing Rosh Yehudi, that you could go there and you could find any quote unquote secular, like they're dealing with any secular public intellectual, and they're aware of Aristotle and psychology and all that's being discussed over there as well. But like, and I see Micha Goodman also in the same rubric as people that are maybe like a lot more liberal and a lot more progressive, but are still find themselves within the Orthodox rubric. And I didn't see that and what he was doing as uber offensive and like trying to change what Tel Aviv looks like. And you could come and say someone having like a mindfulness conversation, or someone that's having like a dialogos conversation. All these are just like cults. They're all trying to like control us and trying. So I just, and then again, the vitriol that goes towards, it's not that this guy's like selling you snake oil or like Hinduism. Your Declaration of Independence is referencing the prophets of the words that he's teaching. Those are what the people he's referencing. And this brings me back to this anecdote. Rabbi Kariv, sends a picture showing the ark where the Torah scroll is standing, like opened, and next to it, there's a huge, same size basically, right? And I think it's important, showing the proportions of the Declaration of Independence, and next to it, there's like these two flags. And he was trying to show like both of these values are important to me. And my response to that is, as a religious person, yes, but clearly God is more important to me. Like the ark is, and if you as a rabbi are doing that, then you lost your way, because like then the title you have doesn't mean anything. Like what is it? Like it's, they're not, you could say that there are religious elements of democracy, and you could say that the fact that we could build together as a unit and vote, like all those have divine elements to them, but what the energy that's pushing them is religion in my eyes.
So I agree in one of the, I agree with the, not with everything. The last part, I don't know what he wanted to say and what the picture, like interpreting the picture is not my point here, but it is one of the midrashim that we had in the secular yeshiva that I found specifically enriching, was the one about idolatry and the notion that whatever value you put at the top, as beautiful and important as it is, that's idolatry, right? If that's at the top, that's always idolatry. And it's, I think, also Peterson talks about that. Yeah. So I've bought into that, right? Like I agree. I think that's a very non-trivial and very strong claim, right? Like whatever, if you put one value, whether it's democracy or peace or art, or whatever it is you put there, once you put that at the top, it's going to warp everything around it to make everything meaningless, right? Like, and it can't, nothing belongs at the top. And this goes also to Neoplatonism and everything. And that's why, like, you cannot say anything positive about God, etc.
Right.
So I'm completely on with you on that. I am trying to sort of draw out the sense that I have in a way that could reach you as well, right? Because I do feel like there's some point where we're not really seeing each other, right? I get what you're saying in the sense that the story of Israel has direct relation to the Jewish people, and that's like, the Jewish people didn't come from nowhere. They're not just some random ethnic group. It's the people of the book and the whole cultural richness that comes with that. Like, and that's something that cannot be overlooked or overstated. I think there are, I'll try, well, I'd say to point to a few things. One, I think there is an element that I kind of didn't focus that you were saying last time that is important, that you're saying, like, if you don't feel like you're a part of this thousands of years old story, then don't live here. It's hard to live here. Why stay? Well, I think that's not really fair, right? Because a lot of people that I know and a lot of people that live here because that's where they were born. That's where they have grown up. That's the culture.
But you're occupying.
That is.
Why are you here?
Historically, right? I'm just saying. First of all, historically, like the way that the people of Israel came into Israel, and the fact that we did not. Up to 1948, no Arab village was destroyed or attacked, or like none of this settling of the land of Israel up to 1948, from, like, I don't know, the 16th or no, the 17th century, was not done through violence or forceful occupation. These lands were a part of the Ottoman Empire. They were bought. And a lot of the Zionist vision was, let's find a place for the Jews, and Uganda was offered, right? But many opposed it, and we are with this solution, like that narrative of we wanted. Just let me just get to that point. We needed to have a place, and this was where it was settled to be, right? For some of it was principal reasons, some of it was political reasons. We did it as virtuously, as morally as we could, and the laws of the world that allowed us to be here. Then you had wars and everything. So with all of that, and also considering like the amount of population, how when Palestinians immigrated here and everything, I don't think there's a good claim to say that we are occupying this place any more than any other country occupies their land.
Sure, and we're playing devil's advocate. I agree with you, and that's also like one of the answers we could give to the world today is being like, forget like the biblical claims, like just like as far as how nations are being built, everyone was a colonizer. That's just like the fact. Sure, but there's zero reason to be then like in the Temple Mount, right? That's gobbledygook. There's nothing special over there. It's a wall. It's crazy that we're even there. Like, it's more than crazy. It's reckless that we're there. So, like, get out of there, obviously, and get out of Hebron. Get any place that has religious significance means nothing.
I think we both agree that if holding those places is, like you said yourself, like you said, if I give you everything, right? If you could guarantee there's no deaths, you would. Like, and we agree on that. So I'm not like, I get what you're saying, that you have a problem with that, but I'm not sure if we, like, the reason that either of us would have to leave any place of religious significance is the same reason, and we agree on the principle that human life is more important. So, like, I'm not sure where we differ on that.
Oh, so human life is more important, right? Like, I don't think we should be killing anyone. Do I think it's worth like sacrificing your life for, like going to the army for? Like, yeah, I do. And like, if I'm going to sell that to my kid, I'm not doing it because this is our land, like America's their land. I'm doing it because this was given to you, and that's why we came back over here, and it's worth fighting for. If you don't think it was given to you, it's really stupid to die for them, because it's just land. And like, you and the family could move to San Diego, to any other place. It's going to be difficult, but you'll be alive. But
but again, like I'm saying, that's a narrative. I understand that's your narrative. I don't know. It's weird to say that's your narrative. I understand that's what you believe, right? I mean, right, the narrative that, like, I would die if, again, let's say if we agree or disagree, right? Because you were saying last time, right, that you would be willing to give up every one of those things if it could guarantee that there would be no more deaths. And obviously, no one can guarantee that, right?
Right.
So I guess maybe we differ on how valuable they are, how much we should fight for these areas that have religious significance. Well, I guess we do differ, right? I personally would not want, let's say, if we have a limited security budget, right, like, which is always the case, and you have to choose where to defend, and we have considerations where it would cost much more in terms of human lives to hold some place like Hebron, then I would say, okay, that's where I say Hebron is not important to me to that degree that I would want to see people.
Right. So I'm with you. And then you take another question. Okay, now I have a budget, which I have people studying the Torah, and I have people that need to join the army, right? So again, I have like this conflict. Now, obviously, if you're secular, it's a complete waste of money and resources that they should be learning.
I don't know. I don't think, I mean, yes, but the point is, different countries can pay street musicians, right, which would be awesome in Israel. And if that's a cultural aspect,
But that's the
that
difference what
Israel
you just said. Because the difference is like, unlike music, which even the musician could be like, but this is my life. And you can be like, but it's not actually your life. Rabbi Akiva wanted to say Shema Yisrael while he was being killed, because only then can I actually do it with all my heart and all my soul. And the difference is because it's not music. It's because the person studying it believes this is the blueprint of the universe. I am studying and connecting to the divine. And while, of course, I need someone to protect me from bullets, ultimately, what gives me sustenance in this world is the fact that I'm connecting back and forth with the divine. Now, I need to do that properly. That means paying taxes. There's many things that come out from that. The fact that there needs to be divine almost, and me also respecting my neighbor and respecting my enemy. All that comes from that divine. But that's where it's coming from, and that's where it's stemming from. And that's why it's more like, it's just like, is it going to be okay for the government to allot some money for musicians? Obviously, on the level of priorities, but religion is always going to be like, it bumps up against almost any other priority, because there's people over here which says the whole goal was to get here and do that. The story was to get here. The flag is a picture of that. The name of our Knesset is because of those rabbis that are there. The number of people we have in the Knesset is because the number of people that we have. Like, it's all it's all based on that. And then you have to ask yourself, but if the Knesset didn't really mean anything, and not that there were 120, and not that the Tarabai, like, so what's the deal, all of this? And if it's all just like, that's my culture, all the other cultures disappeared. You're the only culture left that's 3,000 years old. So either you're too old because no one's playing that cultural game anymore, so you need to just shut up, which is what I say in 1948, the Bible became alive. So the world had to be like, what is this? Why is this happening again? And that's what I'm saying. You can't come up and say like, hey, we're back. We're the Israelites, because that's over. But if you are still the Israelites, then be the Israelites. And a big part of me believes that a lot of both internal strife and external pressures come from the fact that we have not yet, we haven't turned into that butterfly yet. And where the world is sort of saying, if you're awesome, then be amazing. And if you're not, then we're going to come at you with like the double standards, how many people are dead, the proportionate, just like it's nonstop going to be like that, as it was up until now. And like, how else do you explain like why we're still in the thicket of it? Like, why is this the most interesting story? We're all over the news again. It's Israel, and it's again, and everyone else is involved, and Russia's involved. And you have to ask yourself, if we're doing all of this because this little piece of land, it's just not worth it if there's nothing divine about it. And if there's and by nothing worth it, that doesn't mean like we need to defend ourselves. We're a country now, so we need to do all those things. But these stories about like, and we said like never again, right. But why did they want to get you the first time? Because you're Jewish. And it's not because like you are in a part of land, or because what happened on the plane yesterday in Kazakhstan, right? That's what the whole world is also scared. Yeah, the whole world is scared because like we don't have control over this Islam ideology, because they lose their shit in a crazy, crazy way. And when they do, they're really mad at you guys. And the Germans were really mad at you, and the Babylonians and the Assyrians, and they're all very mad at you. And now it seems like we're mad at ourselves. So when I see someone telling me like, no, you can't pray like that in Tel Aviv, you're telling me this, like my Jewish brother, that you'd be like, yes, that's where you need to hear it, because you need to tweak it. And that's why if the message is coming wrong to the Jew living in Israel, it's definitely coming off wrong to America. So again, there's enough blame to go around. And the way Israel represents its religion, I don't think, or the people in power that represent its religion, I don't think are doing a good job. But it's crazy that people would come after Rosh Yehudi, because you would so much rather Rosh Yehudi be in the position of power over the Haredim, the ultra-Orthodox. But the way we even are looking at him being like, that's too extreme. So what's not extreme enough? Rabbi Gilad Kariv, a reform rabbi that his top value is democracy and not even the religion that imbues him with the power of being a rabbi. That's an empty vessel. And you could be like, great. An empty vessel is also Gafni, who's still stuck in Europe. He's also an empty vessel. I agree. But I don't know. I know I'm getting heated a little, but
yeah, I see that you're getting heated, and I don't want to. I don't want to undermine. Like, first of all, I think it's a good sign, right? Like, if you're passionate about the things that really matter, right? Sometimes it's good to get passionate about things. The interesting thing is, at least to me in this, is like there's that all of those elements that you described, and then there's all of those other elements that are present in the story of the land of Israel, of the country of Israel, let's say. This
what do you mean by all those other elements? You're talking about, let's say, just the facts on the ground, the fact that like.
No, I'll specify, right? All of the aliyot, all of the kibbutzim, all of the movements that came here that were predominantly secular, predominantly socialist, like in their leanings, the spirit, let's say, of Ben Gurion and all of the people that built this place. Herzl, who was, very much against, all of those different elements. He wanted the flag to have, I think, 7 stars for a 7-hour workday or something like that, like something about social conditions that we would be exemplary of. I think that this battle for, which of these stories matters more, right, is a real battle that's going on. Like if we talked about culture wars or their equivalent in Israel, I think that's the sort of thing that people are feeling is being disregarded, disrespected, and sort of pushed to the side. Like you were saying about why the Knesset has 120 members. Well, you could also talk about why we have the laws and the judicial system and the general political system, which is inherited from the British Mandate, more or less. Like our state that's being torn between the Middle East and the West is also a lot because of that. Like we took a lot from the West that, the British Mandate was here, and a lot of the people that just came from the West before the people from the East came, and built a lot of this, put a lot of this in place. And there's so much at the moment animosity and hatred towards the Ashkenazi Jews and the secular and the kibbutzes and all of those elements. Like, there's a sense of betrayal. There's a sense of ingratitude, right? Like, okay, you built, all of the foundation from here, but now, you should just get out of the way, right? Because we want to get the Jewish stuff now, right? So don't bother us with all of your secular stuff. It doesn't really matter, and you shouldn't, bring it up, right? Do you see how at least experience?
I see where you're going with this, and like, I mean, I know, like, I'm not saying none of those secular things matter, but this goes back to, I think I mentioned this last time we spoke about how there's a famous, and again, I see these things as religious trends, as Mashiach ben David and Mashiach ben Yosef, but the Gemara about Yerovam asking me Barosh, and he says ben David Barosh, and that's also the same thing that happened with Gilad Kariv. Like, yes, I have a tremendous amount of gratitude for Trumpeldor and for people that dried out the swamps, and we couldn't have done it without them. And more than that, there has yet to be proper recognition from, we'll call it the kingdom of Judah has not yet recognized the kingdom of Israel properly. And Reb Kook talks about this a lot, that it requires both of them need to see each other. However, when it says that there's the death of and the great eulogy for Messiah ben Yosef, eventually, as a religious person, I believe that we're not supposed to mimic what America looks like. That's not like, those were tools to allow us, and like I said, like, we're supposed to look around, we're supposed to take from the other nations, we're supposed to do that, but we're supposed to elevate those things. And obviously you could say like, Bibi is doing a horrible job, the system we have is doing a horrible job. So all those things are clearly not doing, but I do look at it, I don't look at it as an empty wagon. I look at it as it was a extremely necessary and robust wagon that has reached its destination, has taken off its load, and now needs to now manifest into something else. And also has to realize that the inertia of that wagon, what was pushing that wagon, was the Jewish element. People in Kishinev weren't thinking like, but the democracy. They kept the Shabbos and they didn't work and they got fired and they got jobs and all that for all those years. The flame was a religious flame. And obviously that changed over the years and it needed to change over the years. And I would agree with you that there's still a big conception in Israel and definitely in the ultra-Orthodox circles of the man in the sky. And there's a conversation with a dude that has like a white beard, right? So that is, it's sad for both parties because 1,000 years ago, the Maimonides tells you that's gobbledygook, right? And they have access to that, right? So that's a problem. And you could say like, well, listen, the seculars wouldn't have a problem if we were talking about like a much more sophisticated, God number one, God number two kind of conversation that people were having about. So that is 100% on the religious folk to up their game. I would argue that Rosh Yehudi is doing a lot more of that compared to, let's say, the ultra-Orthodox. Like, that is a guy that's going to be using. Now, some people are going to say, like, yeah, but he's using sneaky language. He's using philosophy to really, like, trick people in to becoming, like, more religious but I look, again, like I said, it's not an empty wagon, but I do think that there's priorities in this country. I don't think that means shoving religious down people's throat. I don't think that means that there isn't room for the secular in this country as well. And granted, you would have to have, like I just said, you would have to have completely different leadership to move moves like this forward. And like I mentioned last time we spoke about the temple, or like, I don't think it's something that falls down from the sky, right? Being something that works.
That connects me to something I want to say. And I do want to, like, before we finish, I want to have a political question to you. But before that, the story of the fall of the Second Temple, right? So I know that there's a lot of complexities in it, but at least a part of that was related to Yuchet Dava and the fanaticism and I think you could say idolatry, right? The notion that God would literally, fight our battles for us, in contrast with what everything in reality tells us, right? The fear, like when you speak of the Third Temple, and when you talk about like what is the fear that we have of religion, that is very much in there. And again, the forces that are promoting the extremist reality denying version of I don't want to say Messianic Judaism because I know it's a wider world.
I am a Messianic Jew.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I know that it's not, but when seculars say, the crazy Messianics, right? They're not talking about Chezi. They might not they might think they're talking about Chezi, but they're not, right? They're talking about the ones that are like the fanatics of the Second Temple, and that's something that I think like bears recognition, right? That is a force that exists in our society, and the secular world feels like they're fighting that. And there's a sense in which that's real. Like when you see the rising of Ben Gvir and Smotrich, right? Like the ultra orthodox are not stopping them, right?
Obviously
religious,
that's a horrible alliance, because unfortunately a lot of their agendas overlap, and they
yeah.
have, because of that, they sort of, each one allows the other one to push their agenda forward, because
Yeah,
most of
yeah.
them are in
I mean,
agreement.
we know it's politics is a very like frustrating thing to look at. But I'm just saying, like the notion of all of those things that you were talking about, right? That we are here for all of these reasons. Like I think there could have been a world in which I were more receptive to that, if not for the clear connotation that I have with that. Like, okay, that's crazy talk. That's the Jewish underground that wanted to blow up the Temple Mount, right? Like
Yeah, but
that's
so I hear what you're saying, but my question to you would be like, why are you not like, okay, but there's other versions of that story where don't which are you interested in the temple? Forget the crazy people. And the question is, people are like, well, that's a myth. That's like a story. And then I tell them like, but we
it's
are
hard
that
for me.
story. It's
It's
still
hard
here.
for me to imagine, right? The third temple. It's like, am I interested? I don't know. It's hard for me to imagine a third temple that is not like a world war at the least, right? Like that doesn't lead to such terrible consequences as, and that doesn't come from such terrible actions as some people in this country have planned and tried to execute, right? Like it it's
A
very hard
very,
to separate
very,
it.
just to be fair, a tiny minority tried
Tiny
to.
minority. I mean, look, Ben and Smotrich are no longer a tiny minority in the sense that they have significant power, and there's a point where
They're not saying, they're not. While I would agree that that's what they want, it's not even. Who knows what they would do? So let's put them aside. I agree with you that they're obviously they're nutso, but I would say that
when
wanting a third.
Nazis come to power, when they have enough, like
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you. I'm saying
they
that's
mean
why.
they represent something, right? Like something in the zeitgeist of Israel, is seeing and resonating with those ideas, and that is frightening to me
Well,
in a way that yeah, I think kind of maybe overshadows the sane and the deep aspects of those things.
so I would say then the secular people that are interested in that, they should be saying no, but I read this quote and I read this book and I saw this study and I understand this rabbi said, like, but there's no conversation like that. There's no conversation which says like, I want a third temple. God, what I'll say, I want a third temple that includes the in my third temple, the Christians and the Islam and the Muslims are there praying as well, right? Because it's a house for all people. And I would stress how in every version of it, it's a house for all people, not just Jews. And I would also mention how it's okay for others to come worship there and then go back and do their idol worship in their version of their religion. And we have plenty of texts that have that discussion. Now that's a lot more pluralistic and open-minded, and we get a whole discussion about what does it mean to be vegetarian and all those things. But no one from the secular world is even interested in that. That's not. And I would say there, what is the end goal? And you could be like, there isn't. What is the end goal of this country? What's the mission of this country? Like you could say like, or like going like, what does that mean? Like, because we invented like the discount key. Is that what you think it culminates? And that you think you're around for 3,000 years just to be another country? And
I think there's value in the you know in the life and works of the people that live in some country, just another country, may exist for a limited amount of time, and eventually will all disappear. Like I personally find that to be, it's enough. I don't see that
I
as a
agree with you. Would you risk your son's life for that level though of enough? Or would you just be like, then I'll move to like it's enough just to live a good life?
I'll say personally, right? Because you're asking me, right? The reason for me not to move anywhere else is because that would be choosing the chaff over the wheat, right? And yeah, I could get more personal security. I could get maybe a more comfortable life, a better salary. I don't know, but the connections that I have here, mainly the ones that I have personally with people, are ones that if I throw that away, then I would be choosing the chaff, so personal security, salary, a comfortable life, over the wheat. What I want to do, what I care about in my life, right? So, yeah, I don't think I could abandon that without going into like what this country is for, or what this religion is for. That's how I see that. Now, if I have a family and I have kids that I need to put in front of myself, I might have different considerations. I might tell you, you know what, Hazi, it feels different now, and now I feel like I have to take care of my children's security, and I want to get out of here. I don't know what that would be, but for now, I do find that like there is a lot of depth and importance even without going to that religious story. And I'll just add one more point is that I find that important to stress, especially outwardly, right, to the world. You don't have to have the story, and all of the load and baggage and religious affiliation to that for there to be a very good reason for you to want to keep living here peacefully and trying to do what you can to spread the most light that you can with your life.
I would argue not many countries have the kind of story we have, so it's more unique in that way. Secondly, I would say that I don't like. It's not that you just like roll over because someone makes it a little inconvenient for you. The problem would be like they're not making it a little inconvenient. They're telling you they want to murder all of you, and if they get the chance, they're gonna do that. And then you're like, it sounds like a really intense place to live. Then and you're like, no, it is. It's really intense. And like my son goes studies in the old city. Why? And there's a good school. Then there's other reasons, but he's walking down. Like I would hope. Obviously, it would be horrible if he was killed, right? Chas v'shalom. However, if he did, he lived his life walking the streets where thousands of Jews beforehand walked with purpose. And that's super deep. Not because because it's a street, because where he went to school, this is what they fought for, to liberate, to build, to cry, to see, to come back. And like, that's what it was. So when I think there's a story I mentioned
One question before the story, like, is it okay that you have that and I have my own? Like, is that something that you see as unideal? Let's say because I should somehow see it the way you do, or
well, I just think if it's not for that, it's not worth risking my kid's life.
to be in the old city. For sure. And like I said,
like you could be like, that's crazy that you're doing it. And I'm saying like, it is crazy. I get it. But like, I'm a Jew in my land. And to me, that means more than I'm like a Swiss in Sweden. I'm a Jew in the place that was promised to me where I'm supposed, this is the geometry of like, I believe like in the Torah, the land and the people. Now that needs to be shifted sometimes, but I am where I'm supposed to be more than where a Swiss person is supposed to be in Switzerland. I am where I'm supposed to be. So that's why if the horrible thing happens and he gets killed over there, I was where I was supposed to be. But if it's just Chicago, then like, didn't you read the stats that there's really high crime over there? Why'd you send him there? Oh, like you're right. There isn't a good reason of why I sent him there. It's just because it's another street. But my grandmother lived here. Okay. So grandma lived here, but I'm saying I'm going way more back than grandma. I'm going back to like the story that propelled us here. And
I mean, I get that that's your story. I'm not.
well, that's the story of the land. It's not even my story. That is a story that's a story that comes together with this land. And
again, like I understand. I think I understand what you're saying about your perspective of that, and
the
I
country's perspective, by the way. You like
that's a bit
if
too
the
abstract.
Declaration of Independence is talking about the prophets, like you need to explain to me, like, what does that mean? Like, what were the prophets talking about? Like, if you're saying the prophets were talking about this land, so it's almost as if you're saying, so it came true what those people were talking about. And if it came true what they were talking about, we value their context. So that's why we decided in our courts, in theory, originally, if you don't have any precedent, go back to your sources, right? Barack decided to go away with that. But that would have been a version of like, I'm going to go back to my sources because I'm dependent on the prophets, which is like why we decided to wait all this time to come over here, which is why we prayed all, like, it's almost like if you're doing it just because like, oh, my grandmother, I'm not saying you, but like my mother always spoke about this place, so that's why I'm here. She spoke about this place because her mother spoke about this place because of the story and the promise that was connected to it. So it's to me, it's too much history for someone to be like, yeah, well, that's not my story. But if you decouple yourself from that, then it's odd that you're in this country then because of all the things that are around it.
Well, it is definitely my sense, and I think of many people living here, that yeah, living here is a very odd experience, right? Like there's a lot about this place, starting from Jewish and democratic, right? Which, like, it's impossible to not see the contradiction, right? Like it is a real problem. Like when you're saying Jewish and democratic, and you have immigration laws, because it they had to be there, right? Like you had to have immigration laws to allow Jews to come here, even if you're not religious, because like there was a dramatic need for that at the time, and definitely if you're religious and you believe like in those stories coming true. But yeah, like there's an I could say that like there would be a lot, you know, life could be a lot simpler if I were a Swiss person living in Switzerland, right? But that's if I were a Swiss person, not someone who decides to stop being here and become, you know, a Swiss citizen. Like that's not the same thing. Like there's, and again, I don't think, maybe like this is not really bridgeable, but I do think I see what you're coming from, and like it isn't where I'm coming from.
Right. That's because in my, when I hear you say like I'm not a Swiss, like there
It
isn't.
happens to be the case. Like I don't, you don't choose where you're
No,
born.
but I'm saying, but it's someone that's secular, and a secular Jew, and by that I mean like like I said earlier, there's place for secular Jews. But let's say an atheist Jew, for example, right, is just a Swiss man. Like if he's not like then what is your connectivity to this place? Is just purely location. Be like, oh, but it's like the culture that I speak about. Like none of those things are worth death. None of those things are worth like your country shutting down, like sending your son out to fight.
Again, there are many countries in the world where you're just that, and you know they have armies and they fight, and they're
where are these countries where it's difficult, where like you have your kind of mobility but you choose to live here?
let's say
you could tell me there's people in Yemen that are stuck right now. I understand that, but if you, the way you're educated and quote unquote like white passing, right, you go anywhere you want to. You'd be like, no, I want to be with my people. And then it goes back to like, who are these people? The Jewish people. Then you're back, you're sucked back.
When I said I want to be with my people, I meant close people, specific people that I have connections with. Right. That's my experience.
Vadai,
Like,
I understand that, but like you said, once you have kids, right, and once the priorities shift, you'll be like, well, not worth me
I
dying.
might say that. I might. I don't know. Like that's not a decision I think you can kind of foresee. Okay.
I'm with you. What I would argue is that like if push came to shove, right, like that should be the priority. And I was saying that as well. Like if push came to shove to me, right, like if you said like it's another Holocaust, like so maybe like yeah, maybe I got a bus, maybe I got to run and hide in the forest, but I would say my tolerance for that would be much higher because the stakes for me are much higher, right? Like it's not like I can move somewhere else. I guess I physically can, but like my soul doesn't want to, right? Like because this is my story. And I would even say, like you just said, democratic and Jewish. Like if you look at the background over here, right? Jacob by Gustav Doré wrestling with the angel, right? That is the story. And it's befitting for us to have to deal with the tension of dealing with an Arab population and at the same time dealing with places like Hebron and things like that. Like that is what we're supposed to do. We are supposed to show the world how we have failed in that dance so far. And like I said, maybe it's speaking Arabic and maybe it's working on the education, but that is stepping up to the plate. That is being a light unto the nations, which is showing like how both the religion can elevate the body politic and the body politic can also strengthen the religion. Unfortunately, you have the ultra-Orthodox groups in the Knesset clearly using democracy as a tool for, on the flip side, you see the secular look at democracy as, like I said, the ideology. Like this is the end all be all. And it's not. It's just a system that so far worked very well for humans. But I have my own treasure trove. And that has a different system that many times it correlates. Many times they don't correlate, and I have a system that gets rid of bad code. And sometimes I'm waiting for society to level up, right? The Declaration of Independence was like, for all intents and purposes, a secular 10 Commandments because it took like 2,000 years for the world to get to that point, which was like bumping up against what a lot of the Bible was already talking about. Can you imagine having "In God We Trust" on Israeli money? How people would lose their shit in this country. And we're the Jewish people, and like America has it on their money, and it would never fly over here having God's.
Look. I mean, I think we're kind of at an impasse, and it's getting quite late.
Sure.
So, I guess the last question, which might be a bit long, but hopefully we can wrap it up before we get too tired, is in the current political situation that we have. I think we agreed on most of it, and we agreed that Bibi has to go, right? And that this
this week is so embarrassing. Like, just shut up. And it's even more embarrassing that then it comes out like, oh, he was pressured by his son. Like, even worse. Like, what the hell? Like,
for sure. I mean, and I don't know. I mean, that sense was definitely present, at least for me and for people around me, for literally years, like that. But now with the war and everything, it becomes so unbearable, right? To have that in your face.
There's no tolerance, obviously, for that kind of issues, and I just think like he's like erased any good things he's done, basically, with like where he's at right now. Like I just can't see him being remembered for anything else but like this fail, unless I don't know, like in BB form, he somehow manages to like, I don't know, become the president of the United States, and like I don't know, he somehow always manages to pull something out. I almost don't want that to happen right now because I think like we need to move on from him, and it wouldn't be good if he like somehow created some version of him becoming like victorious. Like I know that sounds crazy because like I want us to be victorious, but I need it to happen where like he's not the hero.
Well, yeah, I mean that doesn't sound crazy. I mean, in the sense, obviously, we need to be victorious, but I think the sense, at least that I think you're describing, is like he's he has crossed every line that he could cross, right? Like maybe every line is a bit too absolute, but like every line that was imaginable before his time, right, has been crossed, and some that we could not even imagine.
I guess I would frame it is that, at least in my eyes, and perhaps a lot in the right, there was a sense which is like, yeah, he gets bogged down with like bullshit politics games that he's playing, like House of Cards games. But ultimately, there's like BB the leader over there, which is like always going to emerge at the end of the day. And I think now it's like it doesn't get more real than this, and you're still playing House of Cards. And like it's just, then there is no leader. Like you're not. This was the moment. This was like the last moment where you just say, like, you know what, I'm going to pull out all my leadership tricks that I have, and I'm going to use them now to navigate this boat. Which is like, this was like, you could say, like, even on the left, it'd be like, at least be like the genius people say you are. But it just seems like you're overwhelmed. You're like, the fact that your son's name was even mentioned is already a fail. Like he should have been. We shouldn't even hear his name, because if we hear his name, that means like politics are still happening, and that's why I just feel like people just saw that. You could say it's the mask slipping, like, he's exposed himself fully. You could say that like he failed, as in maybe that was true before him, but now not. But I just don't see a leader. I just see right now like just like a bobbling head talking, and I hope I'm wrong. I hope that he has his fingers on the pulse and he knows exactly what's happening and he's leading us to victory. But
do you think, this is the question I wanted to ask?
Yeah.
If there's somehow a lessening of whatever condition, let's say a lessening of the threat of rockets and whatever it is that allows for protests, would you be standing shoulder to shoulder with me protesting like Bibi has to go because we have to move forward?
You're asking me two different things right now. Like, because like, am I pro the reforms? I'm pro many of the reforms they want to do. If you're asking me now if there was a different protest to remove Bibi from power, specifically on that, yeah, I could be with you. And even to that, I would say, no, you know what? I was going to be like, who are the alternatives? Like, I guess if it came up to be between, let's say, Bibi and Zahava Galon, which is throwing like an extreme over here, I would still pick Bibi because like I'm being Machiavellian about it, which I just still think she's more detrimental. You asked me now, like, do I want someone else to be the prime minister? The answer is yes, and for a while. Do I think specifically now he's not fit to run? Yeah, I think like I would be. There's no version of me voting for him unless like it's like I think like I have zero other option. And if I thought that he was, for example, running, and because he's running, he's pushing out like other relevant people, I would protest against him, and I think he should step down. And I guess we use the word protest. I don't know what I would be protesting specifically against. I just think if he was running again, I would be opposed to that.
My question was a bit different. Like, there's a talk of Iamun Consultivi, so like forming a new government under
now?
One of the people there now.
No way. Too risky. Also because of the like. At the end of the day, like this, like, and I could be wrong about this, obviously, we, for better or worse, we are too intertwined with other countries. And I can't see how you bring in another player at that level to play with the other countries. I see it a complete fail. Like if it was Gadi Eisenkot having the conversations like with Biden and like Russia, I just don't think he's. I know this sounds very weird because I think Bibi is coming out weak right now. However, I still think he is a more. Again, you're talking to me about like I'm doing this based on like what I think would be detrimental. I think it would be dangerous for Israel to play that game right now and have elections and show again mistrust in during wartime. So I would be against doing that right now. personally. I just think it would be a tactical mistake, not because I want him in power, more that I just think like that could cause too many issues. You might be thinking like, what do you need to see more to be convinced to decide that he needs to go? I don't know, like even right now we're going into Gaza, right? Like I'm assuming he's not making the war plans, right? Like he's being told these are options and these are options, and the people are making these decisions together, obviously. So if I found out right now that like he's completely ignoring the advice of all the generals and like he's doing some nuts solo move, then I would go out to the streets. I'd be like, the guy's completely, out of control. Right now, the attitude is still he is sitting in the war room, and I believe he doesn't want there to be more bloodshed for the Israelis or for the Jews, definitely. And I think with the party he's with, like we have to sort of roll with this right now. So I think it would be a mistake to. I also think it's going to end up creating more. It's going to bring back the division in the country again, and I think that's another mistake, which I think we as the population need to be extremely. We need to show a tremendous amount of solidarity. I think also to the Arab world, we need to show a solidarity.
I mean,
these are not fun things to hear.
Well, solidarity of the Arab world is not the one that I disagree with on. I think there are many scenarios that could have gone much worse with the Israeli Arabs that didn't go, at least so far, as bad as they could have.
For sure.
So I don't
like when I'm seeing it could be that it's just.
But I'm just saying. One of the reasons it's very smiling.
I'm smiling because I see in your face, and I'm saying some of it's because it's late, but part of me feels like you're saying like you almost look disappointed that like that I still wouldn't be able, like, even though I gave all those stipulations, he should go, things like that, like you weren't able to have me stand shoulder to shoulder by you at this moment. And like I could be wrong, but I in my eye, I guess I see you're looking like, how is he not seeing it?
Something like that. I mean,
yeah, that could be frustrating. I don't think I'm like, and know that you're saying this, I don't think I'm an idiot, but like I'm just not. I guess I don't see it the way you do yet, and I'm wondering to myself, like, what am I not seeing? And like, maybe like I don't have this love for Bibi, and it's not because like, oh, but he's right wing. I just don't see it that way yet.
Well, like the things that are going on, like the day-to-day experience, right? Still, the amount of venom pointed like daily towards me, towards the heads of the security people, and towards an 85-year-old hostage that was released and had an interview, and like I'm not happy with the effect that maybe the things she said had, and gave some trouble for our public diplomacy. But the level of hate, the level of just terrible I don't know how to call it, like just evil, right? And
well, that's a result of othering on both sides. I know you don't like the both sides, but like,
yeah, well, look, let's just put that, like, both sides in this case, like comparing violence from right wing to left wing, right? The right wing has historically in Israel been orders of magnitude more violent towards the left wing than the other way around, and that's like well documented. You can listen to Many Mountainer talk about it.
I
Many
mean, we're
Mountain,
fortunate, thank God, where there isn't like we don't have like crazy fights, brawls on the street constantly in this country, and like thank God. Like I agree with you that it's the right wing that's more that is more violent. I would just say that like to people watching, Israel specifically isn't just not like an insanely violent place. Like you don't have like left protests being just like shot and murdered and beaten. But yes, like I agree with you. I'm just putting it in context of our conversation that the right wing has been more violent. My point about the othering or on both sides is just the rhetoric and language that's being used, and we discussed this last time. That's amplified by social media. It also already skews those numbers because it's just like it's people are being fed it constantly, and you could, by the way, it could be the amounts on the right are
there
more.
are names and people responsible for that, and the person in charge of a lot of the terrible, uh, let's say, verbal violence, right? The hate that's being spread towards the anyone who disagrees with them is coming, with a lot of documentation directly from Netanyahu and from ministers that are kissing his ass. And like, how Machiavellian can you be? Like, there's a point where it's just like you have the you have a leader that is actively fighting against about half of the people here, right? And to say, yeah, he like I wouldn't remove him from power even when he's responsible for this level of failure, even when the failures that are just around the corner might be even greater. How can I mean it's
By the way, now I'm saying I wouldn't remove him now because I just think it would be more of a risk. And you're saying like it's a risk keeping him on. I understand
yeah,
that. Like I understand
exactly.
that. We disagree right now. Of like what's up, buddy? No, Mateo. Go make a pee pee and go to sleep. Is that done? Go. Um, right winger. But he, so yes, I just think I guess I don't think we're there yet, and like you could be like we're already past that point. I also think though that this is, I also think that we produce our own leaders. And you could be like, Chazi, though the blame is more on the right. Like, no problem. Like, the blame could be on the right. And specifically here, Bibi also got rid of all the potential leaders in his orbit because that's like what he does in his style. But I also think that like, and you'll tell me that like Yair Golan would be an example of someone that is worthy of, let's say, leadership. But generally speaking, I think like it's also the door. Like we're getting what we deserve in a certain sense, like where we don't like we didn't develop good leadership. We have horrible way how we talk on the media, how the news anchors talk. Like we allowed for this sort of to develop. And again, you could be like the right voted for him many times. That's all true. You and I discussed this last time. I think the left should have done a much better job on like their platform and what they were going for. But so I think we're also in this scenario because we, like I'm saying, as a people, we allow this to happen to ourselves. And there's a lot of questions, which is like, where are those leaders? Where are the people that you could identify and be like, this guy over here is just looks like he's like a rock star? And you've mentioned like, there's people that you've identified that you thought like were more worthy of that. I used to think he was very regal. I obviously no longer think that anymore. And right now it's more of I think it would just be dangerous. But if I could be convinced otherwise, like with data, quote unquote, which I thought like he's not listening, and I think being detrimental, then I would say he needs to go. And then yes, I would be like, and if he didn't want to go, then it's worth it protesting. And more than that, and if like he still wouldn't go, then it's worth getting arrested. It's worth getting hit with a water cannon, because then you're fighting like evil. I think it was a mistake. Like they have this in the States as well. Like, Trump is Hitler, like, but he's not though. So don't like use that term. And I was just saying, let's say the right is bringing, like, they're fascists. It's silly to say that, because they're not. Use other words and use other ways to sort of get around that, because like if they're a fascist.
Have I said something in our conversations that was unfair to the right?
No, I don't think so.
So, I mean, my point is not to, to put any, labels, to call anyone Hitler, to call anyone fascist. Like that.
But I'm just saying, like, we've created a ground where like you're saying, like, when you hear that Israel's no longer a democracy, when people say that, like, you lose credibility for what you're arguing, because then you would all be arrested, right? Or you'd all be in jail, or they would close the news. Like, so
well,
when they
there's ways in which, like, when people say Israel is no longer a democracy, or that it's becoming
processes,
processes, and also, right, there's what's called soft dictatorships, and there are different versions of not democratic. And the notion, for instance, that Smotrich expressed by saying, like, what's the problem? Like, we get to rule here for these 4 years, and then the other side can get to rule and do what they want for 4 years. That is already not what you like. That is already a version, even though that's not what would happen. Like, because you can get to change the rules, but like that is already a version of non-democratic or
even
soft dictatorship, right? Like,
even if that's the case, I would argue, like, I just want to see the riots against China also, like, because it's nuts. We can't have that. Like, my point is, like, even if that was true, it's still would you still live in this country, or would you leave to a different country? Or, like, as in saying, like, it's no longer what it was, but is it like the bad man from the movies? I'm not giving an excuse for. So
I don't know this phrase, but one of my coworkers who's traditional used it to describe his relation. He said, "B'moshav letzim lo teshev." Right? If this place becomes so deranged that it's, right, like, just moshav letzim, like, even that verse tells you, like, you shouldn't be here, and that's like.
So I agree with you that the Knesset is a moshav letzim. It's disgusting to see them operate. I'm laughing because, like, we recently went over that in Pirkei Avot. I'm also laughing because, like, that's my point. Like, you quoting that's the treasure trove. So, like, as far as I'm concerned, like, that's the Rosh Yehudi. That's, like, that should be your move, your go-to.
Okay, never mind. I don't think Rosh Yehudi were the ones that help. I don't think that helps, but that's beside the point. Like, I think, like, this, I agree, and I told you that I agree that this is the treasure trove. But, like, we have our disagreements on how that should be implemented. My more important point is
I agree with you, though, that it's a moshav, that it turned into a moshav letzim. And again, my hope is that right now, at least, it's more serious than that, because it has to be. Me saying that, like, I hear his son being mentioned, to me is like an indication that, like, it's still a moshav letzim if that's happening. And I guess that's like
many indications of that. Why is his wife involved in almost everything? She is in the cabinet meetings. Why is he having meetings, like, in the cabinet with the Bardugo and the consultants for his media and his family? Like, there is nothing about his behavior that speaks to anything other than campaigning. And the all of the signs point to exactly the behavior of spin dictators, populist leaders. That one of the elements seen across those domains, right, across different countries in which in which populist leaders have risen is they're always doing a campaign, and every crisis needs to, be used for a political goal. Like those are patterns that, I mean, I don't
I mean,
know.
he's wearing the black shirt and the no tie, right? Like it's all a campaign. He's war zone BB. He's like wartime BB. Yes, I agree with you that
He was wearing his Uniqlo coat in like 36 Celsius degrees. I don't know if it's because he wanted a bulletproof vest under it, or because it's his wartime clothing. Like he really likes that coat, or because he's just, gotten to the point of mental instability where that happens to people where they're disconnected from the weather. I have no idea, right? But none of the options for why the hell he looks like that give any good indications of him being fit to do anything in this campaign. I don't. And as for what you were saying about him ignoring the advice of the professional ranks, that has been reported in 2 cases now. Now you can say that maybe it was a good thing that he ignored them, but there were already twice where that has been reported.
I would assume, just specifically to that, I would say obviously there's times where the general doesn't listen. I mean the commander in chief doesn't listen to them, and you end up being victorious. Obviously, you could say at this point, I doubt he has the wherewithal to make that kind of discernment and that kind of judgment. I guess I would hope that you would hear from Gant or Gallant if they thought things went astray. On the other hand, both of them are also implicit in this whole debacle anyways. They were there as well. And that wouldn't change regardless. Even if you got rid of BB and you put someone else in, you still have people that orchestrated, people to blame for this are still going to be in the room. And we just have to deal with that at this point.
Yeah. Only that in this case, right, you don't have the ideal available to you, right? Where all of these people would have to leave, and you'd be only with people who don't have all of the bullshit that these people have. But again, specifically in this case, and this is not the just not BB, right? I'm just saying there are specific elements related to him specifically that are being acted out right now that are so detrimental, that are so dangerous every day. And I mean, yeah, that's the part of me that's saying, how, what more do you need to see? All the things you described have happened.
I would say like this, and we'll end on this note. I'm getting the look from my wife. I would say like this. If I knew that I push a button and BB's gone, I would do it now. However, I think even if you have all the right intentions, right? Do you agree with me that, let's say, a protest like that or a call for his removal now would immediately be politicized? And that's where I think it's too risky. You can't have people coming on this. Now you'll be like, this is the moment where we need to have people on the streets. I'm nervous. It's only worth it if you would be able to guarantee that it happens. But if it gets out of control again, and we rewind a few months, I don't know if that's worth it. Now you'd be like, what if it gets way worse? And be like, you're right. Then you were right. And now we'll have to deal with it at that point. But right now I'm nervous that, and this is not fair, the way BB and the right, or let's say we'll say the extreme right would react, it would almost force the left to then overreact, and then you're in a game again. So I think on that level, I still think it's too risky. But I agree with you that if we could, if you had told me, Chezi, if 150 of us sign this, he's gone, then yes, I'll sign it now.
Okay.
This is as much as I could give you.
Well.
All right, dude. This was enjoyable and to be continued.
Yeah.
Our wartime diaries. Have a great week, and please God, maybe we'll meet face to face one day.
You too. Bye.